Hi, in this video, we'll be going through what is elasticities for demand and supply. So we'll really explain thoroughly what is price elasticity of demand, and actually the concepts just apply it to the supply curve and you'll be able to have the price elasticity of supply. But first, we want a very good understanding on what is the price elasticity of demand. So let's imagine you are a contractor and you want to make more money. So how do you do so? Well, you can raise the fare by 50 cents, and if you assume that everyone still takes the train, then you earn $50 million. But here's the problem. If you raise the money, then your quantity demanded falls, correct? If your quantity demanded falls, then in that case, there will be fewer trips taken in overall. So that means the revenue generated may or may not rise, because if you lose more people than necessary, then you actually lose money. If you think about it, so if you're like demand curve here, and at first you're producing at this point, but you decided to price it here, then you will produce this revenue instead of this. And if this area is less than this, then you lose money. So how do we know what tells us how much we are losing? Well, we shall use what is called the price elasticity of demand, which is the measure of how sensitive the quantity demanded is to the change in price. So one way of measuring the price elasticity of demand is using this known as percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price. So for example, if you have a 2% rise in your price and a 3% drop in your quantity demanded, then it will be minus 3% over 2%, which is minus 1.5. So we say that the price elasticity of demand is minus 1.5. So some things to take note is that this PED will always be a negative value, because if you have a positive change in price, then you have a negative change in quantity demanded. So by the formula, here will be negative, then here is positive, then it will be negative overall. And then if you have a decrease in the price, so this is negative, then your quantity demanded is positive. So again, the ratio will still be negative. And there is a straightforward interpretation that it just tells us the percentage change in quantity demanded for each 1% change in the price. So for example, a elasticity of minus 2.5, meaning that if price rises by 1%, then the quantity demanded falls by 2.5%. And so in general, the greater the value, the more sensitive your quantity demanded is to the price. Because as you see, if now if your price elasticity is minus 3, a bigger number, then a 1% rise will lead to a 3% fall. So it's more sensitive, you change more. So one thing to note, let's take an example to see. So if you have a change in price from A to B, then your price rises by 22.22%, but your quantity falls by 33%. So your elasticity is 1.485. But the problem is, if A goes to B, but if B goes to A, then actually the price and quantity percentages are different, and so the elasticity is different. Why, you might think? Because, okay, so how to calculate change in price percent is P final minus P initial over P initial. If you go from B to A, then your initial value is smaller. So in order to ensure that the PED over an interval is the same, meaning you travel from here to here is will be equal PEDs, we have to take into account by using the midway point way of calculating percentage change. So the change value is still the same, but then your midway point now, this P, instead of using P1 or P0, you use P1 plus P0 divided by 2. And by doing so, we can also do the same for quantity demanded, which actually results in now allowing us to have the same PD whether you change from B to A or A to B. Okay, so a shortcut is, if you can just rewrite the formula, you actually see that the PED is just the Q1 minus the Q0 over the Q1 plus Q0 times P1 plus P0 over P1 minus P0. And if you were to think about it in straight line graphs, how is it represented by the PED? Well, we actually can recognize that okay, so let's just see what's happening to the PED along a straight line graph. So when the price of the laptop rises by $500, if we move from A to B, then the percentage change is 0.4. But if you actually move from C to D, it is possible to have a percentage change which is different. So in other words, even if the same PED, the same concept of PED increases as you move along the line. And if you move upwards and leftwards along the straight line demand curve, so this way, then the same increment in price will correspond to a smaller and smaller percentage increment in price, because your base value is now larger because you have increased price. So you can see what do I mean over here using the graph. The demand actually becomes more elastic as we move up and leftwards. So you see, if for every dollar increase now, the smaller and smaller the percentage change increases. And for each quantity decrease, the larger and larger the percentage decreases. So in general, actually the elasticity depends on which point you're traveling to and from, and it is not actually the gradient or the slope. But you can actually just say, if it's just a straight line graph, the general concept is the steeper you are, the more inelastic you'll be. And you can actually show why from this formula. But the key concept is that the elasticity does not equal to the gradient. Even with a constant gradient, your elasticity changes from which point you travel to and from. So with that understanding that we know that PED is usually different, how do we now categorize the goods by the elasticity? Well, first we take into account the extreme cases known as the perfectly inelastic and perfectly elastic demand. So for inelastic, it means that the PED is 0, meaning it's a vertical line, meaning even if we change whatever prices, the quantity demanded will always stay the same. And for PED infinite, perfectly elastic, then if you just have a change in your price, there will be infinite amount. Your price cannot change basically. So you are whatever price it is, you have zero changes to the price. So then you're perfectly elastic. So for inelastic demand, we will say that this change is less than the change in price. So it's less than 1. The demand curve will be steeper and the price sensitivity of the consumer is lower. So we say that the quantity demanded is not sensitive to the change in price. And for unitary elastic demand, then they have a 1-to-1 ratio. As for elastic demand, then we just say the PED is larger than 1. So then the quantity demanded is sensitive to the changes in price. Next, how do we change the PED of a good, or determine the PED whether it be elastic or inelastic without the values? Well, we just need to see the logic flow. Let's say we have a lot of substitutes. Then it means that if we were to change our price, let's say we increase our price, then people will be very unhappy, and because there's a lot of substitutes, they can just shift over to other substitutes, meaning our fall in quantity demand will be very great. So in that case, the more substitutes we have, the more elastic our demand is. And different ways to increase the availability of substitute will be how easy is it to find our substitutes. Like if our product is very unique, then it's very hard to find substitutes. Another way is how necessary it is. So the more necessary it is, the harder it is to find substitutes, because people will need your good. And if you do it in the short term, then our demand is always more inelastic, because in the long run, more and more competitors will come into the market. And another one is just how you view the good, whether it is taking up a large sum of your income or not. The more money it takes up, the more price elastic the demand is, because then that means, because if you spend even more money, then the people who really don't like it and then just leave, and then so your quantity change is greater. So those are the determinants for PED. You just need to use the flow of the logic in economics, where if the price increase, your quantity demanded decrease. So how much this quantity demanded really depends on how you argue. Other forms of elasticity will be income elasticity. So as you know, just now we do change in price lead to a change in quantity demanded. For income, now we say the change in income lead to a change in quantity demanded. So the formula is the same. Everything else we went through is the same. Now, instead of categorizing the goods as elastic or inelastic, we just need to say that for normal goods, the income elasticity will always be greater than 1. Because if you have normal good, if you have a rise in your income, then this will decrease. Normal good in this case means luxury good. So if your income decrease, then because it's a luxury good, your fall in quantity demanded is very high, so the income elasticity will be positive. Then your inferior good, if your price increase, then your quantity demanded decrease. So opposite direction means it's negative. Then we also have the cross elasticity of demand, and it's just the percentage change in your price of a substitute leading to a quantity demanded in your own good. This is to help us determine how other influences causes a change in your quantity demanded. So for substitutes, we will know that the cross elasticity will be positive, while for complements, the cross elasticity is negative. I'll leave it to you to look at this formula to determine why, and you should be able to from my explanation from income elasticity. Lastly, we will just look briefly on the factors that affect the price elasticity of supply, which again is defined to be the percentage change in quantity supplied now over the percentage change in your price. And it measures how sensitive your suppliers is or producers is in when there's a change in the price. You will again use the midpoint method to conclude, and for supply inelastic, the PES will be less than 1, and supply elastic, the PES is larger than 1. So you can see how this is awfully similar to what we did for price elasticity of demand, so we wouldn't need to go through that again. What we will talk about is now the determinants of price elasticity of supply. So the idea is we want the more elastic supply is, that means the sellers can change the quantity produced greatly. So how do we change quantity produced faster? Well, we will need to see the supply chain. So if the supply chain has processors, meaning so we can see that creating a submarine is way harder than creating a sampan, then it will of course be less elastic because you cannot change the quantity produced easily. Another one is the long run and short run. So of course, in the long run, firms can build more factories, they have technological improvements, or more firms can enter the market, so the supply will increase more once more firms are in the market. Once the firms become more technologically advanced, then they can change the supply any way they want. So in the long run, your price elasticity or supply will always be greater in value. So I hope you have understood what I said in this video. I hope you can take your time to go through it again. Hope you have enjoyed it. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.